interview tonight on Anderson Cooper. Excuse me, on that was interviewed by Anderson Cooper on AC 360. It is not yet known at this time exactly what transpired between George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. It is not quite known at this time what exactly happened between those two that prompted the gunshot that killed Trayvon. Now, we also need to make it clear that this community that this happened in, it was a suburban area of Florida. It was a suburban area of Florida. It was what people would like to consider it's a secluded, gated community, if you will. That is also very important in regards to some of the other things that we will be discussing in tonight's show. So it was in a suburban neighborhood, and it was in a what is being reported as a gated community, a secluded kind of off in the suburbs community. And it's also been reported by some sources that Trayvon Martin may have been wearing a hood at the time of this shooting, which was also going to be a very important piece of this puzzle as we get deeper and deeper into tonight's show. So that is basically the story in a nutshell, if you will. And Zimmerman was not immediately arrested for the crime. As a matter of fact, there was no investigation that was launched at all, at least not an investigation that prompted an arrest. And so the NAACP, the Department of Justice, and many other organizations from around the country, hundreds of thousands of people have rallied in Sanford, Florida, to get answers as to why George Zimmerman has not been arrested for the murder of this 17-year-old teenager. First of all, I want to gather you all's opinions about this very sad, very tragic case. David E. Reddick, who I had mentioned before, he is the Calhoun County NAACP president. Mm-hmm. I know that the national president has spoken on CNN in regards to this story. How do you, as a member of the NAACP, which does fight for the rights of African Americans, how do you feel about this story?
First, can I read the statement that Ben Jelisa, our national president, put out?
Yeah,
it's really short.
You may.
All right, the NAACP's number one concern in this case remains securing the arrest, prosecution, and conviction of George Zimmerman. We are cautiously pleased that Chief Lee has stepped aside for his failure to assure that Mr. Zimmerman was arrested. Any chief who would do so, allow his officers to mishandle a situation like this, has no place in law enforcement. At the end of this investigation, it will be clear that his temporary removal should be made permanent. We must stay focused on the arrest and ask that the police department track Mr. Zimmerman's whereabouts. Our community deserves better, and Trayvon's family deserves justice. And that's a statement released by our national president, Mr. Todd Jellis, Benjamin Todd Jellis. And my personal opinion is I'm glad that something like this can hit national news. I'm glad that it comes out like this. I'm glad that Troy Davis hit national news. I'm glad that the Gina 6 hit national news because, you know, people have to know that there is a watchdog. And this watchdog has to be out there to ensure that when justice is not prevailing, that we'll get out here and we'll make a scene. We'll do what it takes to make justice prevail. Because like Martin Luther King said, a threat to injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Mm-hmm. And we have to be that watchdog, and we have to be there to make this kind of thing happen. Because there was a time where You know, if an injustice happened to somebody, especially a minority in a prominent neighborhood, it got swept under the rug. You know, in this case, it took 2 days before Trayvon was actually identified, so his father can actually come down and identify his body. They put him as a John Doe in the same neighborhood, a 17-year-old John Doe in the same neighborhood where a father is reporting his 17-year-old son being missing. And it took 2 days for them to figure that out. You know, this is a situation where it's good that this kind of stuff hits the public ear, because it's letting people know that you can't do this kind of treatment. You can't mistreat people anymore, and it's not going to be tolerated. Hopefully it's an outcry that'll let this entire nation see that justice has to prevail, and we can't mistreat people and sweep people under the rug because we don't think they deserve our justice or deserve to be treated fairly.
Mr. William Allen, who, as I mentioned earlier, he does work with the Reverend Al Sharpton with the civil rights group National Action Network. Can you just kind of express your
Yeah, I can. I just listened to Reverend Al Sharpton make a speech about this incident that happened in Florida. I'm here in Anniston to set up a chapter here dealing with a situation like happened in Florida. So we're trying to get it started here in Anniston. There's some problems that happen here in Anniston that we're trying to deal with too. So that's one reason over here in Anniston, Alabama, it's time to get the chapter started. And I'll be here for the next 2 days working on it, try to get it started. Okay?
Jelisa Raquel, I know you told me earlier you heard the 911 call that George Zimmerman made to police in regards to Trayvon's walking through the neighborhood. Can you tell us how you felt when you heard the 911 call?
Well, this is my first time listening to the recording with a group of friends, and immediately when it got to the end of the recording, like, everyone in the room was just emotional. Like, my mouth dropped. Like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. To actually hear the shots and hear the 17-year-old guy calling for help, like, it was a very emotional moment. Like, man, stuff like this still happens, you know? Like, it was just like a wake-up call. Like, people are really, really seriously trying to overlook this situation. It's just amazed me that nothing had been done until it made national headline, you know?
Zandra K Hall, who is a broadcaster here at WLJS Studios. Can you tell me when you first heard about this case and what initially came to your mind when you heard of it?
When I first heard about the case, I think it was like Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was Sunday, and that's when they started to slowly release all of the 911 tapes.
Mm-hmm.
They had one from George Zimmerman, and that was him calling, and he was like, you know, that it's a guy in the neighborhood. He looks suspicious. He has a hoodie. He has some jeans on, and his hands in his pocket. He's up to no good and stuff like that. And the dispatcher's on the phone telling him that we're sending people over, and then you can hear like wind in the background, so you could tell that he's like getting out of a car to follow the boy, and the dispatcher is like, no, don't follow him. And he's like, okay. But, you know, from the story, you know that he follows him and, you know, allegedly kills him. So it's just sad. It's really sad. And you have the evidence and you hear it live and you hear it in your ears and you're just like, wow, like, this is real. It gets real. And it's still, I don't want to say that George is a racist. I don't want to say that, because I don't think that he hates black people, but I do think he did discriminate because he was a black male. So to say that somebody's racist, I think he did make a very bad decision in taking the shot, and he did discriminate because he was a black male in that gated community, a community where he probably felt like he was misplaced and he did not fit the norm, so he looked like he was up to no good based on that definition.
Do any of the rest of you all think that George Zimmerman is a racist? And the reason why I ask is because according to his attorney that was interviewed by Anderson Cooper earlier a couple hours ago, that George is not a racist, and that his family says it. As a matter of fact, it has also been reported too that George Zimmerman even has African American members within his own family, because George Zimmerman is of mixed race. As I said earlier, he is of Caucasian and Peruvian descent. Peru is a country in South America. Do you all think that George Zimmerman is a racist?
I'm not going to speak on whether I believe he's a racist or not, because I don't know him personally. But I do believe, just because the simple fact you're stating that you have different, heritage or whatever, and you of different races or whatever, and so you claim not to be racist, I don't feel like that's gonna justify it, because I feel like there's African American that are racist towards their own race. So that doesn't justify you saying that you're not racist because of your heritage.
I think it's got a lot to do with where he was in his community and the community's background and their identity. Because when the news interviewed one of the neighbors that was also on the crime watch, and they asked the neighbor, do you think it's provoked? Him, without even knowing Trayvon or really knowing George that well, stated that, oh, in my opinion it was. Just because, he fit a certain profile. So I believe that the entire neighborhood or that area kind of, I ain't gonna say they're racist, but they were profiling, because he didn't do anything. He's walking from the store. He wasn't looking in anybody's window. He wasn't doing anything. He was actually on the phone with his girlfriend. So what was he doing to provoke him to be questioned or even stopped or accosted other than fitting a profile? So I don't know if he was a white guy, if it would have happened the same way, or if he was Latino, but he was profiled because of his stance and how he looked. He was most definitely profiled.
And as I said, it was said.
Well, I can
I'm sorry,
say
go ahead.
this about the situation. A lot of times people see young men out with their pants down below the waist.
Sagging, yes.
Sagging it.
We've discussed that on this show many times.
Kind of afraid of them. Back in the 60s, a lot of people got kind of afraid of us because we wore our hair long. You can't judge people on what they have on their head or something like that. I think that's the wrong way to judge the person,
Well, and I think too, Mr. Allen, like I said, we've done a show on appearance. This show, the Jacksonville State University's president, Dr. William Martin Meehan, we and him, and as well as other students of this university that we're broadcasting from, we did discuss how appearance can give off a certain vibe about you, whether it is intentional or not. And now that's not to excuse the fact that just because you have a hoodie on, that you're wearing a hood on your head, that necessarily makes you a criminal. It's just, I'm okay. Cause see, sagging, that I believe sagging is an intentional fashion, if you will. You have to intentionally sag, because you either have to have no belt on at all, or it's barely hanging by the loop. But a hoodie, anybody in cold weather, or if they just want to be isolated mentally for that moment of time, because that's why sometimes I wear hoodies, just to be isolated for that moment of time. It's kind of like your curtain, if you will. And I'm trying to figure out how would a hoodie give off this idea that you maybe were causing some trouble. Do you all think that you may have any? I know, and the reason why I say this is because I know, especially in things such as bank robberies, the robbers themselves will have hoodies on, but a 17-year-old walking through a neighborhood with a hoodie on, especially if it's maybe a little windy outside, do you all think maybe
And here's my question: had Mr. Zimmerman not been toting a 9mm, you think he would have stopped?
You said had he not been toting a
Had he not been
9mm.
toting his 9mm, do you think he would have stopped Trayvon and did the same thing he did had he not been carrying that weapon? I mean, did he want the vigilante? Did he want the action? I mean, do you think he would have did the same thing, or do you think he would have waited for the cops to come had he not been carrying a gun with him?
Mm-hmm. So you think the gun may have further increased his adrenaline, if you will, to go